Don't hang up that phone. We've found what you're looking for. Welcome to the Let's Talk Cabling Podcast with Chuck Bowser, RCDD. Well, seeing how we're pulling Category 6A, the most powerful twisted pair in the world, you got to ask yourself this one question. Did I pull 295 or 300 feet? Well, do you feel lucky? Do you, punk? What exactly does RCDD stand for? Registered Communications Distribution Designer. Just the expert you need to ensure your cable plant performs exactly as designed. The elite professional, knowledgeable, and experienced in leading-edge ICT design principles. Now, send the new guy to the truck for a bucket of dial tone and the cable stretchers, while you listen to an informative program on telecommunications.
Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That can only mean one thing. After Hours Live with Chuck Bowser, RCDD, where you get to ask your favorite RCDD questions on cable, installation, certification, design, project management, estimation, even career path questions. Answer all of them. But we always know I start off every single live stream with, what are you drinking? What are you drinking? I know it looks like I'm drinking muddy water, doesn't it? But I'm actually drinking pear juice. My wife and I canned a bunch of pears. I don't know, like 20 quarts, 24 quarts, something like that. And we don't put sugar in this stuff, so it's just pure. It's actually not. It's actually pineapple pear. So it's a Florida thing because you can't grow pears in Florida because it doesn't get cold enough. So it's actually pretty good. I put a tiny bit of honey in there, not the whiskey, the actual honey. Because remember, it's after hours. You can't be drinking live. You can't be drinking alcoholic beverages. That is allowed. Saskatchewan is in the house. Hello, Saskatchewan. How you doing, my friend? You got to tell me, where is Saskatchewan? I have no idea. I have no idea where that is. So before we get too much further along, let's do a recap because I haven't been on live stream the last couple of weeks. Traveling, had computer issues. Oh my gosh, just anything and everything did go wrong over the last 2 weeks. But let's talk about the videos that we pushed out, right? So we did a video on text giving. Mission 5 is the recipient this year. Hello, Michael. Can we catch up tomorrow, Michael? I really want to get that thing done that you and I are working on. I really do. Okay. And Eric, you were on my mind yesterday, dude. I need to talk to you because I haven't talked to my mentee. Well, actually, I take it back. I did talk to you. See what happens when you get old? I did talk to you. I remember it now. So there you go. So the cool thing, Ed, Ed, the old tech guy, is in the house. Hey, Ed, can you meet up, or can you since you got the conference, since you know how to get in touch with Colonel Dump, the bearded IT guy, I want to get you three on the show. Let's set up a show and have you guys be interviewed on the show. Talking about the last show, so I did a show about text giving, where Technology Worldwide is they're giving voice and data security access control system away to Mission 5 in Baltimore, Maryland, and they're getting people to donate labor, people to donate equipment, all that fun stuff. So really should think about doing that. Then the show after that, I did Industry Icon with Penny Downey. Really good friend of mine. She's one of those people who likes to operate in the background, right? Next week's show is I've got Brady on talking about a labeler. So you might want to make sure you catch next week's show. And I got a bunch of them in the hopper. I just, with travel and everything else, I've just been going kind of crazy lately. So I need to get all of them kind of scheduled and stuff. Tom is in the house. Hello, Tom. How are you doing, my friend? Oh, one thing I do want to point out. Next week, NECA in Philadelphia. I will be there. I will be at NECA in Philly. So if you're in the Philadelphia area, go to the NECA show. if you're going to the NECA show, let me know. Come by and visit me, right? Tom, are you going to go to the NECA show? If you are, you better come by and say hi to me. That's all I'm just saying, right? That's all I'm just saying. So it's just salutations from San Antonio. Oh, I love San Antonio, by the way. With so many different technologies and specialties, how do you become proficient in them? Or do you need to pick one and specialize them? That is a great question, Jordan. Absolutely great question. So I refer to myself as a generalist, an RCDD generalist. It's like a doctor, right? So when you go to your doctor because you got a pain in your shoulder, right? You go to your general practitioner, they're going to look at it, and then they're going to refer you to a specialist potentially. So I'm a generalist. I know a little bit about everything, all right? But there's people who specialize in voice systems, people who specialize in data systems, people who specialize in access control, VoIP, right? All that kind of stuff. So yeah, there are specialists. Absolutely, there are specialists. So if one of those specialists really excites you, I would say get your base certification first, right? And then get your RCDD. But absolutely, you want to make sure that you get that, right? Right. So yeah, absolutely. That was a great question. That was on my head today too, by the way. So let's talk about the questions that are some special. Here you go. Ed, the old tech guy's chiming in. Ed says some specialize in DWDM layer 2 and layer 3. That's what we should talk about. The OSI model. That's it. Get in touch with Colonel Dump and the Beard IT guy, and let's have a show about the OSI model. Yes. There we go. So let's go through the questions. I got 7 of them. So here I got them all written down on my handy dandy, extremely convenient, messy handwriting. So the first question is, Chuck, how many sheets of plywood should I put in the TR room? Okay, that depends, right? That really, really depends. Let's talk about some confusion that's out there. Okay, technically, so codes are for safety. You have to follow codes. Standards are for performance. You don't have to follow the standards unless you're in a contract with the customer that stipulates that your work will meet and or exceed the standards. Then contractually you have to follow the standards. So let's go through those. The code book does not say anything about putting plywood in a telecom room. It doesn't say anything. Nothing at all. The standards tells us at least one wall should be covered with 3/4 inch AC grade plywood. One wall should be covered with 3/4 inch AC grade plywood. AC means that one side of the plywood is beautiful, the other side is not quite so pretty. So you want to mount the pretty one to the pretty one's facing out. Look, my brother's in the house. Stole the wife's phone while at dinner and keep kicking out the knowledge, big bro. That's my little bro right there. Nice. Glad to have you here, buddy. Glad to have you here. If you have a question, put it in the chat box. I got you covered. So going back to the plywood, so the standard says one wall should be covered with 3/4 inch AC grade plywood. When you go to the Bixby Best Practice Manuals, the TDMM, the ITSM manual, those tell you 2 walls should be covered with 3/4 inch AC grade plywood. So the answer is kind of ambiguous. But you got to ask yourself, do you want to be good? Do you want to be better? Or do you want to be the best? Right? If you want to be the best, then follow the best practices. So Jordan is asking us fire rated plywood. So yes, it does have to be fire rated. Well, your local authority having jurisdiction may require it to be fire rated. So fire rated plywood, by the way, has a stamp on it. So when you mount that plywood to the wall, make sure you put the stamp facing outward. Okay. Some jurisdictions are going to make you put fire retardant paint on fire retardant plywood. Okay. If you do, you got to paint all sides, front, back, and all the insides. The Bixby recommendation in the ICT field guides. If you don't have a copy of these, dude, get a copy. Get a set. Copper, fiber, and general practices cost like $65, $75, something like that. Here, show so the TikTok people can see it. You need to get one of these. And when you call Bixby to order one, tell them Chuck sent you. Okay? Tell them Chuck sent you. So that way they realize I am making an impact in this industry. Right? So, anyways, the So the best practice manual says, unless the inspector is telling you to put paint on it, the recommendation by Big C is to not paint it, because the chemical that they treat the plywood with, it doesn't allow the paint to adhere to it. So their recommendation is don't paint it unless you have an AHJ telling you have to do it. Now, getting back to that plywood, you do have to mount that plywood to the wall, right? That's one of my mentees right there, Mr. Henry Yates. If you ever take a Big C class, he might be one of your teachers. He's a really smart guy. Really smart guy. Anyways, you got to securely mount them to the wall. So you got to use toggle bolts and fender washers. Place no more than 2 feet apart, at least 2 inches away from the edge, all the way around the perimeter, and then down the center. If you don't want to use toggle bolts with fender washers, you can use galvanized screws. The galvanized screws has to be at least a half of an inch longer than the thickness of the gypsum board and the thickness of the plywood. It's got to go through both of those and get into the thing. Jordan points out that if you do paint it, make sure you don't paint over the stamp. Yes, I might have forgotten to say that. Absolutely. If it's a fire-rated plywood with a stamp, do not paint over it. And make sure the stamp is facing outward. So thank you, Jordan, for catching me on that, because that is absolutely critical. Now, another recommendation by the one of the best practice. Again, do you want to be good? Do you want to be better? Or do you want to be the best? Do you want to be the best? Follow that book, right? They're going to tell you that you should also use some type of construction adhesive, right? Liquid nails or something like that, right? So absolutely make sure for it. Look who's in the house. Low Vault Warby is in the house. Mr. Famous Closet Dresser himself. How you doing, my friend? Glad to have you here. So that is the plywood question that I got, right? So the next question is, Chuck, can I run OFNR inside of interduct? Can I run OFNR inside of interduct? OFNR, optical fiber, non-conductive, riser rating. So the question is kind of maybe, right? Maybe. Because you didn't tell me if it was a riser or plenum rated area. So let's kind of boil this down. If it's a plenum rated area and you're using plenum rated interduct, then you have to use OFNP, right? Plenum. You got to put plenum cable inside that plenum interduct, inside that plenum space. Because when it catches on fire, the heat will melt the interduct and melt the cable. So both those have to be plenum. See, where the confusion comes from, there's a lot of people out there that know the rule in the code book that says if you have a conduit going through a plenum rated space, you can put a riser rated cable inside that conduit. And that is true, because the conduit's considered its own pathway, right? Because it's not going to melt that conduit. So, oh, good. Anthony's going to start doing some more content soon. Absolutely. If you don't follow Low Volt Warby on the social medias, do so. He's what I call a closet artist. You know, even on my best day dressing out closets, I'm not as good as him or Sean Rapp or All Green Light. So, oh, by the way, the electricians are coming next week to put the power to the new podcast studio. Yes. So, you know, if that happens, then it's going to come the plywood, and then everything moves up there, and all the new shows will start coming from the podcast studio. Can't wait for that. So getting back to the OFNR questions out of interduct, if it's a riser rated area, it's a riser rated interduct, then absolutely you can put OFNR inside of it. Okay, but you can't put riser inside of a plenum interduct in a plenum pathway. That's where a lot of that confusion comes from. Next question: does armored fiber need to be installed inside of interduct? No, it doesn't. Quite often. Well, let's talk about interduct first. Most people, when they're installing premise distribution fiber, they install it inside of interduct. Now, why do we install it inside of interduct, right? That's the real question. The most common answer I usually get is, well, we do it because of protection. Raise your hand if you've ever stepped on interduct. Let me know what happened to it in the chat box. If you've ever stepped on interduct, what does it do to interduct? Just let me know in the chat box, right? The two real reasons for interduct is A, it's a visual warning to tell other trades to stay away from your fiber, right? If they break your fiber, we're going to charge you $1 million to come fix it. That's what that means, right? That orange tells them to stay away from it. And it's also a pathway for future fibers. That's the real reason for the interduct. Okay. Now, armored fiber, for those who may not know, and I don't have my sample here on my desk. It's actually packed away. I was teaching in Ohio last week, so I haven't unpacked it yet. The armored fiber has a metallic interlocking wrap. It's usually made out of aluminum. It is conductive. And they designed it for industrial premises, right? So you're worried about a forklift hitting that cable or something like that, right? But the industry started putting armored fiber inside of regular commercial buildings. Now, a regular commercial building doesn't need to be as protected with armored fiber, but the reason they do it is because even though armored fiber is more expensive per foot, when you factor in interduct and your regular premise fiber, then armored fiber actually becomes cheaper. So armored fiber kind of came as a result about that. So generally, you're going to find armored fiber by itself or inside plant fiber, type buffered fiber, premise distribution fiber. They all mean the same thing inside of that interduct. So no, you don't need to put armored fiber inside of interduct. Now, if you want to have like a future pathway, let's say you're going from one telecom room to another telecom room, and let's say you're going through some closed ceiling space and some pain in the neck to get through there, and you happen to have some interduct, absolutely run the interduct. Absolutely run that armored fiber. Pro tip 33, though, always leave a pull string or pull rope, right? Always leave that pull string or pull rope. So that way you have a future pathway. So yes, you can, but it's not going to negate that. So there you go. Somebody asks on the LinkedIn feed, where in Ohio was I teaching? I taught in Cincinnati, or technically it's Covington. It's right over the river. I taught in Columbus, and then I taught in Cleveland. So I taught in all three of those cities last week. And boy, what a whirlwind that was. Holy Toledo. That's a lot of driving, for a poor old guy like me. So, hey, before I answer the next question, make sure you pay attention to my LinkedIn feeds, because I got interviewed on 2 podcasts about 2 months ago. They just finally both got published. Gray Bar has a podcast. They interviewed me. And then there's another one called I Could Do That. They interviewed me, and that one published out just like yesterday or today. So make sure you pay attention to my LinkedIn feed and go listen to those podcasts. And when you go listen to those podcasts, make sure you tag them and let them know that you're there because I was on that channel. It just helps to spread the word a little bit, right? Right. All right, let's go to the next question. Chuck, can you explain the difference between a Mutoa and a consolidation point? Yes, I can. So what are the differences between a Mutoa and a consolidation point? Well, for those who may not know. So let's say, for example, you have an office that's got modular furniture. You have a building that's got a classroom with a lot of locations in it. And those desks are always moving. Well, instead of having to move those cables all the time, you can run a cable either through a consolidation point or a Mutoa. Kind of depends. So what are the differences? There's lots of them, actually. Let's go through the first one, the Mutoa. Mutoa is just a fancy acronym. It stands for Multi-User Telecommunications Outlet Assembly. It's a faceplate or a small termination block mounted on permanent building structure right next to the modular furniture. The Mutoa is an end-user interface. So literally, the customer will take a patch cord, plug it into the faceplate, and then run the patch cord through the furniture, through the desk. The lady's desk has got all the stinky shoes and the heater, and then plug it into the phone and into the computer. Right? It is an end-user interface. Now, a consolidation point, what you're going to do is you're going to run a cable, and you're going to put it into a terminator, for example, like on a 110 block, and then you're going to run a cable from that 110 block to the drop, right? Now, the difference is you're going to use a Mutoa where the changes are very frequent. Very frequent. You're going to use a consolidation point where the changes are less frequent. Now, the reason it's less frequent is because in order to fix that with a consolidation point, you got to run a new cable from the faceplate to the consolidation point, right? But that's okay. It's designed that way because that way, if they move say the desks are like here, right? But they move them further away. If you've got a consolidation point, you only have to run a cable from the new location to the consolidation point. You don't have to run it all the way back to the telecom room. That's the advantage of the consolidation point. Another difference between the consolidation point and the Mutoa. The consolidation point is not I repeat, is not an end user interface. Somebody asked me, do I teach in Los Angeles? I do not. Los Angeles is not my footprint. So, but if I can get enough people to take a class, I'll fly out there under the banner of Let's Talk Cabling and teach a class. I've got a fire stopping class that you can take. So there you go. There it is. So the consolidation point is not an end user interface. Plus, in your consolidation point, that is for passive equipment only. Passive equipment only. Meaning, if it needs electricity to run, you should not be putting it inside of the consolidation point. Should not. Absolutely should not. Okay. That's the biggest difference between the consolidation point and the Mutoa, right? One's an end user interface, one is not. One is just literally running patch cords, the other's having to replace a whole nother segment. One is for when you always are making changes, and the other one is for when the changes are very infrequent, right? Yanking C clips. I'm not sure what that means, Brady. Yanking C clips. I don't know. You got me. I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, let's talk about this. Chuck, my cable's failing. My boss says it's because I use too much lubricant. It's failing because of insertion loss. That would be the first place I would go. Absolutely. Now, there's many reasons why a cable might fail because of insertion loss. Moisture is one of them. But in order of things that I would look at, first I would look at the cable length. Is it too long? And then I would look at, did it run through a hot environment? Right? Because that can cause insertion loss too. Then I would look, okay, is it wet? So using cable pulling lubricant will cause your cable to fail if you put too much in there. Because cable pulling lubricant is 3% solids, 97%, ready for this? Water. Yeah, water. Exactly. Now, the reason it's so bad is because when a cable gets wet, a lot of people, if you don't know this, you should know this. The signal travels on the outside of the copper conductor. That's called the skin effect, right? So it travels on the outside of the copper, right underneath the dielectric. And because the dielectric is resistant to the current, the electrons are pushed forward. So when a cable gets wet, the jacket gets wet, the dielectric gets wet. And think about this. Water is conductive. Water is conductive. So now the dielectric's wet. So it's actually easier for the electrons to go out through the wet jacket, right? So when you're using pulling lubricant, make sure that you only use as little as you need to get it through that system. As little as you need to get it through that system, right? And because if you use too much, you could cause insertion loss. Also, yeah, telling this to my TikTok peep too. Do not use soap as a cable pulling lubricant. But Chuck, it works. Yeah, but you know what? It hasn't been tested. See, all of the cable lubricant manufacturers test their lubricant with the cable to see if there's an adverse effect on the cable jacket. Does it cause the cable jacket to break down? And does it affect performance? Dawn dish soap doesn't test their soap on cable because that's not the intended use. So always use cable pulling lubricant that's designed for high performance data cabling. Never use yellow 77 on inside plant cabling. Yellow 77 is for outside plant cabling. My brother is in the room today, could probably tell you that. He's probably used a lot of. Did you use any yellow 77 today, Peanut? Let me know. He's actually in here today. My brother's in the room. I love that. You should attend more of them, buddy. You really should. All righty, so the next question is, Chuck, why is my fish tape getting stuck halfway down the wall at our project? We're wiring up a church. That's probably because there's a fire break somewhere. So you get, a lot of people in your residential constructions and your wood frame constructions, you have your wooden studs, and about halfway they're going to do a vertical piece of wood that's called a fire block to keep the fire from going up. Well, you ain't going to get through that with a fish tape. So what you really need to get through that is what's called a flexible drill bit. And they come in different sizes. I've seen 3-footers, 4-footers, 6-footers, and they're bendable. So you go up in the attic, you drill down through the header, and then you just kind of go straight down, and you drill through the fire break. And then you go down, you cut the hole, you pull, put your pull string on, and then pull it back out again, right? Those flexible drill bits, though, are not cheap. They are not cheap. So keep that in mind, right? The next question is, and this actually came to me via phone call tonight. Good old Rick Hauser, working for Black Box, good friend of mine. We've known each other for 30 years, right? Yeah, yep, wedging between the fire breaks. Fire breaks, absolutely. I've gotten it through there before, but if you're lucky enough to get the fish tape through there, when the cable goes through, the cable's going to get crushed. It's going to get crushed. So just use that flexible drill bit. Anyways, Rick Hauser, he shot me a question today. He called me up, and he's installing a Category 6A rated 110 block. Category 6A rated 110 block. They do make them. So a Category 6 110 block, Category 5E 110 block, it has a row, and that row has 25 pairs. So you can land either 4-pair cabling or backbone cabling on it, right? So if you're doing backbone cabling, each row holds 25 pair. If you're doing 4-pair cabling, you can get 6 4-pairs to one row, because 6 times 4 is 24, right? You have one open spot there on the end. And then what technicians do, they'll put C4 clips all the way across, and then they'll put either a C4 clip on that end or a C5 clip on that end to cover up that spot. Either one of those works fine. A Category 6A rated 110 block, or at least the model he was working with a Leviton model. That's why he called me. There's only 4 landing spots per row. 4 C4 landing spots per row. They put space in between each of those to reduce the effects of EMI, electromagnetic interference. Right. So he called me up today, and he said to me, my multi punch down tool is not fitting on the C4 clips to seat them. I'm like, what? I didn't know that. See, Chuck learned something new today. Chuck doesn't know everything. Chuck does not know everything, right? Chuck's a generalist. I'm not an outside plant specialist person like my brother is. I'm not a computer specialist like Ed, the old tech guy, is, right? I'm not a specialist. I'm good at general knowledge in communications. So the Leviton 110 block, the Cat 6A block, when you're putting the C4 clips on them, you have to use the tool that's specifically designed for that clip, because number one, the spacing between the pairs is different. A regular 5-banger will not work on it. Right? But the good thing is, if you got a Cat 6A patch panel, you can still use a regular tool bagger. It's only on that 110-100 that you have to use that specific 110 tool by Leviton for that Cat 6A 110 chip. So there you go. So tell me, Chuck, what happened to Cat 7 cable? Is it still out there? Yes, it is. It is out there. Now, for those who may not know, we have Cat 5e, Cat 6, Cat 6a, Cat 7, Cat 7a, and Cat 8. Well, depends on which standard you're reading. If you're reading the ANSI standard, it goes from Cat 5 to Cat 6 to Cat 6a to Cat 8. If you're reading the ISO standard, it has those, and Cat 7 and Cat 7a, right? So in the U.S. standards, the American National Standards Institute, the ANSI standards, there is no Cat 7. There is no Cat 7a. We go from 6a to Cat 8. So because of that, you don't see too much Cat 7 installed in the U.S. Let me know in the chat boxes. Have you ever installed Cat 7 cable or Cat 7a cable? And if you did, what kind of a customer was it? Was it a hospital? Was it a commercial office building? Right. So in the U.S., we generally don't install Cat 7 cable. When you look at the ISO standard, the International Organization of Standardization, the ISO 11801 standard, they have Cat 7, and they also have Cat 7a. Right. Now, the difference between Cat 7, one of the differences between Cat 7 and Cat 7a is the connector that they put on the end of that. The Cat 7 was a terabyte connector. It was a proprietary type of connector. The Cat 7a had an RJ45 on the end of it. You know, the way that the standards are written, they always want to make sure that you put an AP8C or RJ45 for us old guys on those cables, because they want those cables to be backwards compatible. That way you can plug a 5E patch cord into a Cat 6 jack. You're only going to get 5E performance, but it'll at least work up to 5E. So they're always made so they can be backwards compatible, right? So yes, in the U.S., you won't come across Cat 7 too often. Cat 7 cable is a heavily shielded cable, which means it's a pain in the neck to work with. And you better make sure that that you bond it to a ground correctly, right? So let's see. Michael here's got a question. Let's see what's Michael saying. Each time people see my post doing 25 to 100 pair cable on a gigabits or 110 blocks, I get a lot of, why are you still using an outdated system? Can you explain the importance of having this as a backup? Oh, that's a great question. Michael, don't let, Ed and I were just talking about this too, just the other day. Don't let people get to you. There are people out there that just, they say stupid things. They say things that aren't true. And there are people out there that they're having such a miserable life that they want to bring you down with them. Don't let it get to you. I had somebody tell me one time that Cat 5e cable was going to be around forever. Forever. I'm like, yeah, no, it's not. No, it's not. Cat 5e cable now, Cat 6 cable performs the same. Cat 5e cable, because so many people are not using it. Manufacturers aren't making it as much. They're not getting the efficiencies of production. So the cost of Cat 5e has been steadily increasing. And once Cat 5e, the price of it gets to the same level as Cat 6 or above Cat 6, which cable do you think a customer is going to buy? 5e or 6? At some point, Cat 5e will go away, right? Same thing with it happened to the Cat 3. Now, so you said 110 blocks and BICS blocks. I hear a lot of that too with 66 blocks, right? There are some applications where that's just going to be a better termination field, right? Especially if you're doing like voice systems and stuff like that. A lot of them still want to use BICS blocks and 110 blocks, and 66 blocks are still being used a lot. For example, like on fire alarm systems, security systems, as that demarcation point and as the interface between the analog between stuff, right? So it's still out there. It's still being used. Don't let people operate from their own environment, from what they see. Oh, I don't see no 110 blocks. I don't see no BICS blocks. It must be old. They don't see the big picture. See, because I travel all across the country and I talk to installers all over the place, and because of the podcast, people send me pictures all the time. I'm telling you, 66 blocks, 110 blocks, and BICS blocks are still being used, and they are fine. They're fine. As long as you're not trying to go, Cat 6A. Well, you can go Cat 6A with 110. I am not sure. Michael, can you do Cat 6A with BICS blocks? That I don't know. I'd actually have to look that up. Told you Chuck doesn't know everything, right? Told you Chuck doesn't know everything. So Cruz Namada is asking me in the TikTok feed, let's see, what is the best cable for 8 camera 4K NVR? Cat 6, Cat 6A. Both of those if you want to future proof it, go Cat 6A. If you don't want to future proof it, Cat 6 will handle that. Cat 6 will do 1 gig up to 328 feet, right? So there you go. That's the best one for it, right? Ed saying, had to ensure the grounding on the rack and panel and cable each pair has full on. It was horrible. Yeah, he's talking about Cat 7 cables. So Henry says, yes, Cat 6A. Henry's a Bixie training delivery specialist. So if Henry says it's true, I believe it. He says there is a Cat 6A gigabits block. So see, I told you, Henry, I don't know everything. I told you. People say Chuck does everything. Chuck doesn't know everything, right? So there you go. Let me see. Got another question coming on TikTok. Depends. Fiber is always the best, but needs a media converter. Cat 6 should be fine. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people, the first thing to go to is always, well, fiber's better. Well, fiber is better, but you know what? When you factor in all the costs, with the camera probably already has an APHC, a copper interface on it. If you run a copper-based cable, all you need is a patch cord. And as Ed pointed out, if you run a fiber cable, then you have to buy a media converter, and on both sides, because you got to change that electron to a photon to work on the fiber, and then back to an electron again, right? So you have those media converters. Those media converters need power, right? Those media converters can go bad, especially if they're mounted in a hot environment. Ed, did you ever talk to those people about the outside plant enclosures? Or outside plant enclosures? Let me know. So they can go bad. I've got a show in the works. I talked to True Fiber yesterday. True Fiber wants to come on the show, and I'm going to try to do a show on fiber media converters. That should be a great show, by the way. I'm looking forward to it. because that's another one of those areas that Chuck is not the best in. I have to actually go research and stuff. So, alrighty, any other questions? I'm past my 30 minutes. I'm at 6:32, but I got 30 people on TikTok and I've got 12 people on the live stream. So, any other questions before I kill the stream? Looking forward to lots of good episodes coming up in the podcast here in the future. If you have some ideas for content for the podcast, make sure that you. I might have given you the wrong number, Ed. I'll have to double check that. If you have an idea for content for the podcast, get in touch with me. Say, hey Chuck, this would be a good show content. So, what are fiber extension grounding best practices? Fiber extension grounding best practices. I don't know what you mean by fiber extension, Ed. If you're talking about outside plant fiber, if you have armored fiber, both ends have to be bonded to the ground. Both ends. The easiest way to bond an armored fiber, there's two ways, actually. You can buy a bullet bond, which we use on our high pure count cabling. It comes with 3 pieces. One piece slides underneath the armor jack and it's got teeth on it. The other one goes on top, and then there's a nut that bolts it all down. Then you run a number 6 from that over. That's the easiest way. And then there's a manufacturer that sells a clip that you can strip off the jacket off an armored fiber, and it snaps to that, and then you can run that over. Okay. So yeah, both ends of the armored fiber have to be bonded to a ground, right? So why does both ends of a fiber cable have to be bonded to a ground? Because we're bonding the cable to give any voltage transients the easiest, quickest path to a ground. Take care, Mr. Brady. Good seeing you, my friend. If you only bond one of the fiber end to the ground, then that voltage has to go all the way through to the other side. So you want to give the quickest path possible. You don't know which side is going to get struck by lightning. That's why both sides have to be bonded to a ground. Actually, what the code reads is, code says you have to bond armored fiber to the ground per manufacturer's instructions, is what it actually says. And every manufacturer that I've ever installed have always said both ends have to be bonded to a ground. So there you go. On a cell tower, we had an engineer ask for fiber versus coax because the grounding was less of an issue. It is less of an issue if the fiber is what's called all dielectric. All dielectric. All dielectric means there's no metal inside of it. Typically, your outside plant cable has some kind of metal in it. A, to be detected when it's buried in the ground, and B, rodent protection, right? So typically, your outside plant fiber cable will have some type of a armor wrapper. There is a manufacturer who makes an armored fiber that's not metallic. It's plastic. It's plastic interlocking. I don't know if they make it for outside plant applications. I'd actually have to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head. So there you go. All right, that was the last question. I'm already 6 minutes past my time. Make sure you tune in next week for another live stream. Although next week's live stream is Thursday. I'm traveling on Thursday. Maybe I should do next week's live stream on Wednesday. That way I can get it in. And because next week I'm going to Nika. I'll be at Nika and Philly, so make sure you come by and visit me. All right, everybody. Until next time, knowledge is power.